joining in today. So as you know, the topic today, we're going to look at really the top 5 administration headaches, and just provide you some tips and tricks that we've kind of come across along the way, and how to avoid those. So before we get too deep, I actually want to start off with a poll question just to kind of see where everybody's at. So what I'm going to do, hopefully you can see this.
Looks good.
You can see it? Okay, on my screen. So we're looking at, does your organization currently use an LMS? So we know, people can be at all different phases of the process here. So just trying to get a handle of where everyone's at before we dive too deep into the content. Give everyone just another moment here to answer. Okay, we'll go ahead and close that, and I'll share these with you so you guys can see. Okay, so it looks like a large amount of people here, so it looks like are currently using an LMS in their organization. So for those of you who are not currently using an LMS in your organization, you've definitely come to the right place. Even we're talking about tips and tricks and, headaches that you guys have. But with that, right, a lot of this is things that you'll want to consider if you're getting ready to consider adopting a learning management system, right? So things to get you started, whether you're talking about your governance, workflows, thinking about communication and rollout plans and all that fun stuff. So we'll kind of dive in there as we go. Thanks for participating. Okay, and just double checking, are we back to the PowerPoint slide, Gordon?
We are.
Okay, perfect. Okay, all right, so we're going to start with number 5. We're going to doing a little bit of a countdown here. So kind of as we go, we'll count down from not the least important, right? They're all important, but kind of counting down to the most specific here. So we're going to start with communication. So first and foremost, right, when we think about communication, really the first thing that we need to consider is communication in the world today, right? So even 5 years ago, we lived in a drastically different world, right? So people are really faced with the challenge of communication, mainly because the world itself is changing, right? What's acceptable today, ways that are acceptable to communicate to people, to our employees, personally, professionally, right? Those things are drastically different from 5 to 10 years ago. It might not have been acceptable to send somebody a text message, right, 5 years ago. Today, if somebody sends me a text, hey, can you get on a quick call? That's almost price of admission, right? I have no qualms with people sending me those types of communications. So you'll find that a lot of the workplaces end up leveraging a lot of these technological advances. But with that, right, also comes the different generations, right? There's blending of generations and their communication style. So that's something we've seen a lot, really, where you have different generations of people, right, and they're all trying to access the same system, but some of them have struggles with, answering emails, while some of them want to hop on a mobile app and check a message board, right? So it's about blending these different levels of communication styles, still keeping it easy, still keeping it at the forefront, but finding a way to communicate with these people that's easy for everyone. So we understand that's certainly a challenge. So with that, just a couple of different points here, and while some of these might seem obvious, I think a lot of the times they're things that we tend to overlook. The first one really kind of dives into even the generational gap, right? Knowing your audience. Who are you talking to? Are you talking to people in the field who really only communicate via phone or via email? Are you talking to techies who are working in your support department, who are very comfortable on their phones, right? So understanding the type of communication that people expect to receive will really go a long way. If you have the ability in your organization to kind of segregate that communication and you have multiple modes of communication that you can communicate and truly bring that message forth in different ways, that will serve you well as well. Don't overlook some of those easy, straightforward things that we all have access to. Things like your email, right? Things like posting on a community bulletin board, things like posting on a portal maybe that you have internally, right? So while those things might not be super exciting, if you can get people trained that it's a consistent source of information, that will certainly serve you well in the long run. The second one, again, seems pretty obvious here, but proofreading. A lot of the times, right, you'll receive an email communication, and you might find typos, or you might find, syntax errors. It's very distracting for your learner, right, for them to go through, and if they're picking out the typos, you're not communicating what you're trying to, right? You're communicating something entirely different, and they're distracted. They're not getting the message. So take a second, have somebody else read, the email you're sending out or the bulletin that you're going to post, just to double check there. Kind of contrary to what we're talking about, grabbing the audience's attention, right? So thinking of really innovative ways, right, to communicate to your users. I've seen even our customers do some really neat things, as far as silly videos to grab people's attention, right? Things that people are not expecting, they always remember. And then the last piece here, I think is probably the most important, is communicating effectively versus over-communicating. So when you talk about communicating effectively, right, you think, okay, I'm gonna send an email, I'm going to send a follow-up email. You might also put this in the category of notifications, right? If your learning management system is sending out notifications, well, just think, if you're in your learning management system and you register for a course, and then you register for a program, and then maybe you're going to check out a discussion forum, and then maybe you're going to pop back and complete a course, right? And somewhere along that line, you get assigned a compliance course. It's actually really important, and the rest you were just kind of poking around. Well, what happens? Maybe you just received 10 emails, right, for all of those actions that just happened. And right in there, hidden in the middle, is your compliance reminder that it's due in 30 days. So what happens is somebody's going through trash, 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 right? They know what they just did. They don't need to be alerted to what they just did. So that compliance email that's actually really important seems to get lost in the shuffle. Right? So take a minute and really truly think about what you're sending to people. Right? Is what you're sending truly a need to communicate? Because what will happen is every time somebody gets maybe a push notification, right, on their cell phone, or they get an announcement pop up, or they see something maybe on your internal portal that's going to pop up from your team, they'll know that that means something, that that's important. I should read that. If you have all these extraneous, notifications and communication tools coming through that truly don't have that level of content, that's where you're going to struggle to catch your user's attention. Okay.
Hey, Holly, we just got a question that I think is really relevant to this topic. So if you don't mind me asking it here, I can.
Absolutely.
And the reason why I ask this is because I actually hear this same exact question quite a bit from our customers and other people we talk to. So they said, we started sending out emails to our learners to encourage them to take training, but we don't want to annoy them. How many emails is too much? And I'll take that question since I'm the marketing guy, and I have a pretty good answer for this. But one thing that you have to look at differently about when you're doing emails to your learner base is that it's not about the volume of emails that you send to them. It's really more about the quality of the emails. So it's not about, I can only send, 1 a month or 2 a month or something like that. It's more about one bad email or one email that's not relevant to somebody is too much. And so when you're sending out emails or coming up with a communication plan on how you communicate with your learners, it's really all about kind of the what's in it for me concept. You have to think about in that email what's in it for me, and that really changes the way you think about and changes the effectiveness of your email to your users. So focus on really adding value in every email that you send out, as opposed to thinking about how many I need to send. Send them when they're important, and send them and make sure that it's talking about the value to them. And a good quick example of that is You know, don't send out information about your new accounting training to your sales staff. You know, so segmenting your groups within your LMS and sending only to those groups, say, that are salespeople, or only to those groups that are in manufacturing business unit or something like that would help. So anyway, thanks for letting me answer that, Holly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great point. All right, so let's pop along. So that really brings us to our next headache here, which is governance. Okay, so when we are looking at governance, right, there's really a lot to consider here, because there's a lot that goes into the governance of your learning management system. And, you know, especially even for those that are not currently on a learning management system, governance is probably one of the most important things to start considering right now, right? So, you know, whether you are shopping for a new LMS, whether you're, you know, implementing a new LMS, you're in the process of rolling out, or even you're live, you're in a maintenance phase, right? No matter the phase that you're in, governance is key, right? So with that, right, think about all of your workflows, you know, thinking about who you're going to give access to what, who should be able to see what. All of these things are making up your entire learning management system. So having a clear set of expectations for yourself, for your other people, is really going to aid you well here. So when planning your workflows, it's really important that you make consideration for all stakeholders. This kind of actually ties into a couple of different elements here, because what happens is, as the idea, right, is that you're going to grow. You're going to grow as an organization, and your learning management system might be contained to, let's say, one team right now. But hopefully, as you grow, right, your learning management system is going to grow. And if you have multiple groups even on there currently, if you are making considerations for those stakeholders, it's really going to help you keep your governance in place, right? So you want to make things that are efficient for all that are using the LMS, and not just you in mind, right? So kind of opening up your mind for a organizational approach versus specifically what's going to make it easiest for me as an administrator. Advance here. All right, so specifically when it comes to, you know, your training and documentation, just a couple of tips here as far as kind of what can help drive your governance forward. I think a lot of this comes back to truly becoming an expert on your learning management system. So you as a LMS administrator, you know, you really should be driving the knowledge of your LMS forward, right? So take it upon yourself to become a product expert. Maybe you're not required to know everything, but you should truly take it upon yourself to learn as much as possible. Because if you think about it, right, as new initiatives come out in your organization, or even when you're working with other people, things that you might not be using in your LMS today, you might find those things are useful in the future, right? So you can really leverage that knowledge of the LMS to implement things. And kind of further, even specifically talking about your governance, right, it can also help you to drive new initiatives and workflows from your other stakeholders. So if you're talking to someone, there's something that they're trying to do, maybe they didn't even know they needed an LMS in their life, right? They do. You have the perfect solution for, you know, them rolling out their program and something that they didn't even know would be beneficial to them. So it really helps, right, with that visibility. And, you know, not only keeping up with those changes and features, this helps you continually reevaluate your processes, right? Are they efficient? You know, most learning management systems, right, I mean, anyone really in the software business, they continue to come up with new features and changes just to remain relevant in the industry. So more than likely, right, your LMS provider will be coming up with new and exciting features that they want you to know about. So with that, right, if you understand these changes, maybe you had a big, long process in place on how to complete a program, right? Maybe that's not relevant today anymore because there's what you were doing in 5 steps, you can now do in 3 due to a new enhancement. So take upon yourself to go to any of those learning engagements, you know, really explore the LMS to see how you can kind of offer that, you know, consistent reevaluation to really keep yourself successful. And with that, you don't want to be a knowledge hog, right? share with everybody, because you might be learning things that truly don't impact you. We're never going to use this. That's not something we'd ever implement. But you might come across somebody at your organization that actually will. And it might, make somebody else's processes more efficient, or, even gain, again, more visibility into the LMS. And the last piece, near and dear to my heart, documentation. Definitely an essential part of governance. I know a lot of smaller organizations don't always document things, right? Because there's 5 people in an office, and we know what we need to know, and that's perfectly fine. But at the end of the day, it's really, really difficult to drive governance forward and to drive processes forward if it's not documented in some place. You need a reference guide for somebody to point back to. What do I do next? Because consistency is the key here, right? If people are completing, right, the same processes over and over and over. I mean, what happens if your LMS administrator is out, and let's say somebody takes over, they miskey some kind of class code, and then down the road you're pulling a report, and that class is not captured, and then that impacts the revenue report, right? So it's this terrible domino effect where small actions that maybe people are not even aware of are not captured along the way. So definitely really important. Think about, if you don't have them, implementing standard operating procedures. A book of, here's the regular things we do. Here's what happens when a class is created. Here's what happens when a class is completed, and really just documenting that for your own use. Or to pass along to others at your organization. Okay. So let's move along to the next section, and that is segmentation. And actually, I have a little poll for you guys here, just to kind of learn a little bit about your audiences. So the question is, which of the following audiences do you provide training to? So take a look at this, if everybody wouldn't mind answering here. Do you provide to multiple audiences, just partners, just customers, just employees? So really just kind of learning about, right, who is the end user for your training? Do people come in? Do you have multiple groups of people coming in and leveraging your LMS? I think traditionally in the past, a lot of learning management systems were, just employees, or that's what the training was used for. But nowadays, especially with all that's going on, right? We need to train our customers. We need to make sure we train our resellers. So there's a lot to that. All right, so let me display this, share the results here, so you guys can see. So we got kind of a mix here a little bit between multiple audiences and just employees. So just kind of going back to what I just said, right? In the past, right, a lot of just employees, but you can see there's definitely a shift there, the multiple audiences coming into play. So let's hide that. Okay. So talking about segmentation, right? We know it's definitely relevant for many people that are here. As your organization grows, there's a couple different considerations to take into place here, right? You might be onboarding new end user audiences, and then you also might be onboarding new teams and departments that are expressing interest in the LMS. At this point in time, right, governance and segmentation are more important than ever, right? And a big part of that is knowing when it's truly important to segment that data. And really that's impactful for both your learners and your administrators. So we'll look at both here. When we're talking about our learners, these are the 3 standard that we typically see in our world. Of course, there might be some others that you guys work with, but when it comes to partners, customers, or employees. A key part of being able to project to these multiple audiences, again, really comes back to understanding those capabilities of your learning management system. Do you have the ability to target independent user groups? it's really, so as with communication, right, same thing kind of comes into play here. It's really, really more effective for your users to see content that is specifically meant for them. So let's take an example here, right? So let's say we have a sales employee log in to the LMS. They're trying to look for some training, and maybe they're already not keen on it, but they have to take some for career development, right? So they're going to log into their LMS and they see 200 classes here. Only 20 of those classes are relevant to them. So how far is that person going to get in their search? Well, if they're really diligent, maybe they'll eventually filter through and find what they're looking for. But a lot of people, that's enough to tell them to log out, and they probably won't ever log back into their training environment, right? So the more you push into the faces of the people that are trying to consume this training, right, the more specific you are and giving them relevant content, things that they don't have to look for, right? I don't have to sift through to find, the 20 trainings that are relevant for them. I can see the different topics now, and maybe I can search for the topics that I'm looking for. But the point is that when I'm logging on to my learning management system, the first and foremost view should be content that is relevant to your learner. Okay, so no matter the user type, that's definitely an important consideration. On the flip side, right, when we look at admin segmentation, right, so through organizational growth, right, you might find those different groups and divisions that are really wanting to take part in the LMS to manage their training. So maybe you rolled it out just from your HR team to manage compliance training. Right, from there, maybe your sales team or your support team has expressed interest in coming on board, and they want to be able to manage their training all through the LMS. So really, if you're unfamiliar with the concept, admin segmentation, it allows your administrators to have a targeted experience, very similar, to what your learners would experience on the flip side, right? So the idea is that your sales team VP can log in and administer his team's training, right? And they only have access to that information. And then your HR team logs on to manage the compliance training, right? And they don't have to sift through sales training to find their information. They're seeing their information up in the forefront, okay? So having a LMS that allows for this layer of admin segmentation is definitely important, particularly as you grow. Another consideration here is within, your different administrative groups, you as an LMS admin, right, you have all the keys to the castle, right? So definitely consider how much access you want each new onboarding group to have, right? So do you want them to be able to delete things? Do you want them to be able to edit courses that they didn't create? While that might seem great in theory, you think you're making less work for yourself. At the end of the day, if you're the owner of this product, right, you're taking on much more work to fix other people's issues if they have too many administrative responsibilities. So, in a small company, you might start with limited, administrative roles, but as you grow, it is very much something to consider training people on what they need to know at that time, right, and giving them access to those administrative functionalities respectively. All right, let's move on to our next topic, and that is program management. So for many people, actually why they start looking for a learning management system is they have some type of program that they need to manage, whether it's compliance, right, a certification, maybe even a regulatory program, right? There are many different types of programs that you might have at your organization that you either already offer or you're considering offering. So an LMS is a really great place to store it and track that information. I'm sure we all know on this call that sometimes that can be an absolute nightmare to manage with or without an LMS, right? So the trick here is really defining your requirements and developing a maintenance plan that's going to work within your mode of delivery, right, inside or outside of the LMS. So making sure that you're thinking through being proactive, right, with your approach and understanding what it is that you're asking of people, how you're asking them to do it, and how you're going to maintain it. It also comes into consideration here if you are altering or making significant changes after a rollout, right? Because we all know that if you've ever done that before, that can cause a lot of confusion upon your users. So really, if you are reevaluating an already rolled out program, you'll want to certainly consider making these changes at a strategic time. So kind of, you know, whether it's dripping those out or making one swift change, right? So if you're constantly changing, there's no consistency. And when it comes to training, a lot of the time what your learners need and crave is that consistency and easy to use information. So just a couple of tips here, and really they all kind of are around leveraging your LMS. So, you know, when it comes to programs, you should be automating your processes as much as possible. You might have an existing program. Maybe you need to alter it to truly fit into your LMS. Do you understand, right, all of the capabilities that your LMS offers when it comes to offering those training plans and all of the different features? Right, it might not entirely fit in, but it might also offer features that you didn't know even existed, right, when you initially designed that program. So keeping those types of things into consideration, right, whether it comes to, you know, tracking this, offering notifications, right? So you shouldn't have to be, you know, pulling up and tracking things every month. You know, the whole point of putting things in a learning management system is to manage the learning, right? So let it work for you, right, when it comes to reporting, you know, when somebody has to recertify, keeping track of how many days are due. That also comes to managers, right? So as an LMS administrator, yes, you're responsible, you know, usually for making sure all of this training gets put out there. But at the same time, you know, you can also empower managers and, you know, people of authority at your organization to truly have some abilities within that learning management system, and to be able to do some kind of self-tracking, you know, sign up for their own notifications, you know, whether they're looking at this, you know, on a mobile app or, you know, getting reports scheduled right to their email box, right? So things like that can really ease the burden on an LMS administrator. But with that, right, will also come your governance, right, and making sure you're giving them access to things that they should have access to. But leveraging the LMS to help you automate that process, it shouldn't be a tedious or manual process. Okay. And then the last piece, delivery. So again, you know, people offer training in all different ways, so make sure you look at the types of delivery methods that are supported within your learning management system. You know, maybe you always used to offer, you know, instructor-led classroom training. Maybe it can be shifted to online learning to make the process a little bit easier, right? So kind of exploring those possibilities and really looking at, you know, today, you know, programs and kind of how to manage that within an LMS will really assist you in kind of moving forward the process and keeping that efficient and effective for you. All right. And the last piece here is user adoption. And now, coincidentally, I rated this my #1 challenge before I actually saw those survey results. So I'm glad to see that what I'm experiencing is very much in line kind of with the feedback that we've gathered for you guys. User adoption, right, really important. I mean, to be honest, anything else that we've talked about through the rest of this webinar really doesn't mean a thing, right, if people aren't using the learning management system. Right, and a lot of the times what it comes down to is change, right? So whether you are adopting a new system, rolling out a new program, right, it all comes down to change. So whether, again, implementing a new LMS, changing processes, you know, rolling out a certification program, you know, again, the biggest issue that we probably face as LMS administrators is user adoption. You can spend days implementing, right, your governance and perfecting your communications, but at the end of the day, what's the point if nobody's using the LMS? So that's very, very frustrating, you know, coming from an LMS administrator perspective. So a couple of things. that we think work for, most general audiences. Of course, in your organization, your organization best, and there might be different tidbits of things that work best for you. But here's some things that we recommend. So first of all, I think it really revolves around keeping things simple and straightforward, right? So you might have purchased a new LMS, and it has all of these great, wonderful features, but you were coming from a tracking on an Excel sheet. Well, that's great, but that is a lot of change for your learners, right? So don't feel like you have to go from 0 to 100, right? Strategic rollouts are key, right? So work with your LMS provider. See if there's a way that you can hide modules or roll things out at a later time. Because once somebody's already in the LMS, right, they're in there taking training, they're much more likely to find things like a mobile app or a gamification more exciting if it's rolled out kind of at a steady pace. And they're already using the system. Oh, did you see this cool new feature that was added? Right? Other than if you give them 5 or 10 new features all at once, it's like a little kid in a candy shop, right? They don't know where to go. There's so much going on, they don't know where to start. So you're much more likely to have kind of that active engagement from your users if you kind of focus on one thing at a time. The next, actually, two, I think kind of go together, and that's communicate and reinforce terminology. So, making sure that you are communicating with people what is happening, what are you excited about, right? It goes beyond email notifications, right? But letting people know what it is that you're doing. Sometimes, it's most effective for you to create a presentation, right? And get up in front of people, take 15 minutes of their time, throw them some candy, right? Get people excited and remembering what's actually happening. It kind of goes hand in hand with the reinforced terminology piece. You'd be surprised, I think, how many people don't know the names of their learning management systems. So using the name of your LMS, use it regularly, use it in conversation, right? It's not just the training system, right? This is Expertus University, right? So using that regularly so people eventually associate that with the training system. Oh, I have to go take training. So building a brand for your learning management system will really help. And it even goes beyond, right, the name. It even goes to talk about your LMS terms, right? So all LMSs work slightly different, so especially if you're shifting from one system to another, right? What somebody might refer to as a course, somebody might refer to as a class, right? There's all of these different terms that come with a new system. So having a really consistent approach to communicating those, whether people are, asking you questions, or you're training people, you're coming up with your documentation, right? Using those terms will get other people using those terms. So just one, make sure you learn them for yourself, and two, making sure you're really communicating that within your organization. And then the last one here, consistency, right? Consistency is key. I don't know how many times, right, we're asked as LMS administrators, you get asked the same question over and over and over and over, and it's frustrating, right? Because you want to make sure you give them the answer, but sometimes it's like, man, I've typed this out 20 times. Why are people still asking me this question? Well, that should prompt two things from you, right? One, you need to make sure that you're communicating the answer consistently and truly evaluating, why is it that people are asking me this question over and over, right? So with, with answering the question consistently, you're getting the answer out there, right? So no matter how frustrated you are, right, ensuring that you're giving that consistent communication is very important. People will catch on. Eventually people will catch on. But the second part of that, right, the why are people asking me this question, you might want to consider looking at the product, right? Is there something that you can change? Is there something that you overlooked? Are there ways to streamline the communication? If not, right, if there's nothing you can change, how can you make it easier on yourself? Make some templates, right? Make some help guides. Put things in places that people will find them. Self-help, right? So finding a way to proactively approach it will certainly help you out in keeping it efficient, right? Making sure that you're not consistently answering those same questions over and over and over. You also want to look at right? Leveraging technology, right? So we're talking about a learning management system that's technology, obviously, but kind of all of this comes down to really working smarter, not harder, and that really filters back to understanding the features of your LMS, right? So once you become that product expert, you know that you can make the best possible processes when it comes to governance. You know that you're doing something the best possible way. So it makes it easier for you. So keeping on top of all of that information and leveraging, thinking through situations, right, until we're all robots, things will have to be constantly evaluated, right, to make sure that you are using the best possible strategy. So just make sure that you're letting the technology work for you. Manual filing systems, right now that's all on the computer, and making sure that you're kind of in line with that and kind of changing with the world, because it really will make your job much, much easier. Also looking at ways to extend your LMS. So if your LMS has any capabilities to really bring training to your users. So what I mean by this is, are your learners, are they already in a portal, in a software program, in a internal product page or a CRM, right? These tools that our users utilize every single day, they're already in this CRM every single day. How can you, as an LMS administrator, bring training to them so they don't have to go out and find the system or locate that learning management system and log in, right? How can you make that easier for them? Because again, the easier it is for your learners to locate the training, the more apt they are to log in and actually complete it. So some cool things, that we've seen is things like embeddable widgets, right? So things like taking your actual catalog page, right? Oh, this is my new training. Always show my new training here, and you can embed a widget, right into a product page, so people can truly see, what's going on. And from there, right, maybe a click brings them right to the LMS. So they don't have to proactively go out to the LMS to look for new training. If you can bring it to them, put it right in front of their face, right, they can't miss it. It's all right there and available to them. And then the last kind of even goes along with that, right, is considering using mobile. I mean, how many times do you come across somebody, right, that doesn't have their cell phone in their hand or a tablet, right? So, I mean, really many companies, right, are already doing this, right? They're giving out tablets, right, to all of their employees. So with that, just kind of jumping on the bandwagon, a lot of LMSs are still working on really perfecting that mobile delivery, but think about becoming an early adopter of that, because, again, people are already on their phones. Make it easier for them to access their training by bringing that training to the forefront. Okay. And then last here, talking about collaboration. So really look at connecting with other LMS administrators, right? Look for groups of professionals that work as LMS administrators. LinkedIn is a really great way to check for kind of some of those active groups. People just to connect with. And that might even be within your LMS provider as well. There might be a community of LMS admins that you can connect with and kind of bounce ideas off people to see how, they're offering their programs or they're offering certain things within the learning management system. Another thing here is have discussions with other members of your organization. You really might be surprised at the perspective that other members of your organization can truly offer. Sometimes when, we're living all of our days right inside the learning management system, it's like you get stuck. You're only looking at things from a certain perspective. So, don't be afraid to ask someone, their opinion that's not involved. You might find, maybe they don't know the LMS, but they might give you a new perspective on something that you never really thought about, or a way to offer something inside the LMS. And last, I think really important here is definitely build a relationship with your LMS provider. They're the expert, right? So if you run into a wall, don't hesitate to connect and ask for help. you might not even have thought of something that maybe one of their other customers is using or how they're offering something, right? So even giving them an idea, here's kind of what we want to do, what do you think? It's always in their best interest to help you adopt their product and use their product well. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to your LMS provider to make sure you're kind of nurturing that relationship and truly, leveraging the product for all that it can offer. All right, guys. So those are our top 5 headaches. So let's kind of open it up to see if anybody has any questions on anything we've covered or want to expand on anything we've covered.
Okay. Well, I'll take it here. Thanks, Holly. First, I wanted to let everybody know that when you exit GoToWebinar today, a brief survey will pop up. So please, we encourage you to let us know what you liked about the webinar or let us know how we can improve it for future webinars. Also, if you'd like to reach out to us directly or schedule a personalized demo of ExpertusONE, we're always here. Please contact us at info@expertus.com or give us a call on the number on the screen. We got quite a few good questions coming in, so I'll get started with this one. So we recently switched to a new LMS and rolled out a single intake process for help requests and account changes. Previously, users were emailing anyone in our department who would respond. I'm having a hard time getting our users to follow the new process and people receiving those emails from the users to enforce the new intake process.
Yes. One of those definitely falls into that change category, huh? So, that's very interesting. I mean, I can tell you from my experience that when you change, let's say you're not even changing learning management systems, take that out of the equation entirely, but when you're changing a process, right, that seems like it's almost more challenging, right, because people they're stuck in their ways of what they're doing, this is how I handle it, or it's much easier for me to just handle it and then go through this other new process. It's something that you can't force somebody to do something, right, at the end of the day, but hopefully consistency and actions can kind of help them adopt that. Working with the people who are maybe kind of going through that intake process and maybe who used to handle it, and working with them, letting them know the impact. This is what's happening. These people are falling through the cracks. Here's what needs to happen. And even following up after the fact. So if somebody comes in, hey, I saw you, took this person in, maybe we can work on this for next time. Would you please just mind sending them over to me or redirecting? So it's not always bad, right? When somebody you want to help everybody, or I like to think most people want to help everything that comes into their inbox. They want to be the person to resolve this inquiry, the issues, right? But it's not bad to point them into the right direction. Hey, I'll take care of it for you this time, but next time you'll want to contact this person and maybe copy them on the email. So open lines of communication there, letting people know the impact, letting your customers be aware of, this is what you did this time, but hey, next time, let's take a look at this. That might be a way to kind of get around that. Hopefully that helps a little.
Okay, thanks, Holly. Next question is, we're thinking of upgrading to a new LMS, but our data has always been a mess. How will that affect our move to a new LMS?
Well, I always say there's no better time to go through your data than when you are switching to a new learning management system. Just because just because you've always done something one way doesn't make it right. And it falls into the change. Change is hard. It's still that same kind of theme here. But really, considering why do we have this information here? What use is it going to be to us in the future? You have 25 years of historical information. Maybe 85% of that data, maybe those users are no longer relevant, right? So things like that. Take a look at what's honestly going to be relevant for you to bring over, whether in a data migration process. Is your coding system for your courses and classes, is that up to par? Really great time to reevaluate it. Almost look at it, when you're starting with a new learning management system, it's like a clean slate, right? You don't have to put all that information in there. It has to go in there some way, right? But it's a really great time to kind of reevaluate and restructure anything that you think would run more efficiently in a different format.
Okay, great. Here's the next question. With our existing LMS, we have a hard time measuring ROI or business impact. do you have any suggestions for how to show ROI? Return on investment.
ROI. Yeah, that's definitely more challenging. I think that's probably a struggle that everybody has, when it comes to measuring that return on investment. I mean, it's something that probably everybody struggles with. A couple things, I guess, truly, leveraging, reporting structures, right? When it comes to your learning management system. So making sure you have somebody that's, if it's not you, somebody that is an expert on reporting and will pull that information and data out. Or also things like if you can connect to something like a system like Salesforce, right? So connecting your two providers together, right? Your excuse me, connecting your LMS to like your CRM where it's managing all of your sales, right? You can truly see, and that's where reporting comes even more important, right? Is having that direct relationship to be able to see, these customers and, what they're spending on training and the revenue, right? So you can see a much more clear vision of truly kind of having that all into light. So any type of integration, right, with your CRM or even ERP or where you're tracking that information, your sales information, would definitely be helpful there.
And if I could add something to that, what I've actually talked to a lot of customers who have really been challenged with this because it's really not clear cut. You have to do a really intensive study to find true ROI. It's just so elusive. But what is much easier, I think, as Holly was alluding to, is finding the return on investment for sales training. That seems to be the easiest ROI measurement because it impacts things very quickly, and it's like a scoreboard. You can really see it. And so a couple of the customers I've worked with in the past, what they've done is they've tracked sales training and the effect on revenue of sales training almost like as an anecdotal example of how our training is effective. So when the big executive comes to them and said, oh, we've spent all this money on training, what kind of ROI have you gotten? And they can say, well, it's very difficult to measure ROI, but here's an example. We were able to measure the sales team's training and we got this return on investment. So it's a great example just to show them that we have tried and it's really hard to measure, but when we have been successful measuring, we show a positive result.
Yep, that's a great point.
Okay, so a couple more questions. I think we have time for two more. Next one is, we've added a lot of virtual online training recently, but have found it cumbersome to log into the LMS and the virtual conference tool also. Is there a way to work around this?
Well, I mean, depending on your LMS, I would, definitely take a look at the capabilities of your learning management system. They all have different possibilities, but you might be able to streamline your process a little bit. Some might even have their own internal virtual tool that can kind of help you aid that process. So, maybe you're always using GoToMeeting or WebEx, but can you cut that out? Do you need to use that additional tool? So definitely, I guess, that would be the first thing that comes to mind, look at your LMS itself to see if there is something else there that you can leverage to kind of streamline that so you're not kind of working out of both of those platforms.
Okay, great. All right, last question for the webinar today. We have a problem with getting employees to take their compliance training. What's the best way to encourage that?
Yep, so compliance training, yeah, it definitely falls into kind of what we've chatted about as far as, programs go. But I would definitely say, look, a lot of compliance training falls on communication. It's one of those things I feel like people, when they join an organization, it's kind of, you have to take it. You have to take the sexual harassment training every year, right? You have to take, your business processes or, your technology sign-off. Those are pretty standard things as a part of most organizations. So I think that the idea here is doing two things. One, making sure that you are communicating what's out there, where it is, when it's due, and being very clear about that. If you can have, the buy-in of executive sponsorship, manager sponsorship, right, that's more power to you, right? Because when somebody hears it from their manager, right, they're more likely to do it than, from their training coordinator over there, right? So getting that buy-in is definitely really helpful. And then And then truly leveraging, again, anything that your LMS can help you leverage, right? So if there's a due date, to enforce due dates, to be able to report on those things. So really to just kind of communicate it out there, and having that platform to show it and to enforce it, hopefully will help out.
Okay. Well, that's all the time we have today, but I did want to let everybody know one more thing. Holly, I think on the next slide is the name of our next webinar that we're going to be having. This is a series that Holly is doing. Today was kind of an all-encompassing, these headaches that people have with LMS administration, but we've also got this one coming up. And what I did to make it easier for everybody is, if you want to RSVP for that right now, just click on the link that's in your chat window on the right-hand side. And you should be able to get it. If you don't get it, text me real fast, or send a question real fast. But I tell you what I'll do is I'll send an email out to everybody who attended today and just give you a link to this webinar, and hopefully you can attend that. And the reason why we separated this out into a separate webinar is because it seems like reporting for people who have just started using the ExpertusONE LMS, that's part of the big reason they switched to ExpertusONE, is because of all the challenges they've had reporting, and it's just a huge issue for most companies. So that we wanted to dedicate some time to that. So anyway, so that's the upcoming webinar, and we really appreciate everybody for coming today and taking some time out. If you have any other additional questions about this topic or anything, Holly and I can both make sure you get those questions answered. So just respond to us on our website, expertus.com. Just send an info to info@expertus.com. So anyway, thanks again, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.